Good morning and welcome to the WellMed Charitable Foundation Caregiver Teleconnection. Today we have a special guest speaker as well as our dear Lucy, and this topic is caregiving and the struggles with addiction. And I want to tell you about our special guest speaker, and then I'll also remind folks how great it is to have Lucy on here. Now, Dr. Jenna Labell, who's got a master's and has a doctorate in psychology, is a clinical psychologist who specializes in the field of addiction and mental health. She has worked in multiple outpatient rehabilitation settings in Montreal, both with adults and youth suffering from substance abuse dependence and/or behavioral addictions. She's currently working as a psychologist at the Allen Edwards Pain Management Unit at the Montreal General Hospital with individuals suffering from chronic pain conditions. And of course, our dear Lucy, she received her master's degree in social work from McGill University, has dedicated her career to supporting caregivers. Lucy was the founder and longstanding manager of the Caregiver Support Center, a multi-service respite program for family caregivers. In 2003 and 2012, she received the Queen's Jubilee Award presented by the Canadian Home Care Association, awarded on the basis of her dedication in developing a national coalition to support the issues and challenges facing informal caregivers. She has published numerous articles and has presented at major conferences on her research findings. Lucy's also a liaison supervisor at the School of Social Work at McGill University. And with that, I welcome you both. Thank you so much for your time and your energy and your expertise in being here today.
Thank you so much, Evelyn. Thank you, Minerva. Good morning, everyone, and welcome. Today we wanted to bring awareness to a subject that is often not talked about, yet touches so many people and their families. That being the topic is addiction. Next slide, please. We will be providing some information about the difficulties of caregiving and why caregivers may in fact be a population at risk for struggling with substance abuse. Then our guest, Dr. Jenna Labell, will go into more details, defining what addiction is, how a person can become addicted to a substance or a behavior, the sign and symptoms of addiction, and some information on how to help yourself or the person you are caring for if they are struggling. Next slide. Now, we know that caregiving can be very rewarding for many, many reasons, and I know it on a personal level. But we also know that caregivers experience a lot of difficult emotions in the process of providing care. Many caregivers feel frustrated, overwhelmed, angry, sad, and resentful at times. These feelings can have a serious impact on your physical and your mental health, especially if you have no outlet for these feelings. As a family caregiver, the focus often is on everyone around you, especially the person you're caring for. Most caregivers have, numerous duties from cooking meals to handling doctor's appointment, administrating medication, many times helping with bathing, dressing, and eating. You know all that. This level of responsibility can cause extreme stress. When left unmanaged, stress can be turned into anxiety, a condition characterized by persistent and a lot of worry. Other symptoms of anxiety may include irritability, sleep problems, trouble with concentrating. These symptoms can make it difficult for you to fulfill your caregiving duties, which can increase your anxiety over time. Another difficulty caregivers face is that of isolation and disconnection. Caregiving can be isolating, can therefore induce feelings of anger, sadness, guilt, hopelessness, and disconnection. Due to the difficult nature of caregiving, those who provide care are also a greater risk for suffering from depression and anxiety. Having anxiety and large stresses in your life can make you more vulnerable to suffering from depression and vice versa. When it comes to drinking alcohol or using other substances, unfortunately, some people may feel that these behaviors are their only outlet for stress, um, as well as their anger, as well as their sadness. A person may use substances to escape the difficulties and the pain of their realities, including caregiving. Some people use substances to try to self medicate their symptoms of depression or anxiety, and in short term, people might find that it, like, quote, works, meaning it dulls their symptoms. However, long term use of substances can actually increase anxiety and depression symptoms and ultimately make these conditions much worse. This is why substance use is considered a maladaptive or harmful coping mechanism. Ultimately, abuse of substance can lead to increased difficulties caring for yourself and for your loved one. This is why it is so important for caregivers to find healthy outlets for themselves, meaningful activities, hobbies, interests that make you feel good, that allow you to release stress and tension in a way that does not lead to potential negative consequences. Next slide, please. Now, we also know that caregivers don't identify themselves, many caregivers don't, as caregivers. They see themselves as either wives, partners, children, or family members, which they are. But they also can neglect the fact that they are in a unique and difficult role of caring for a loved one, which is not an easy job. Some caregivers do not take care of themselves or have difficulties prioritizing their own needs. Statistics shows that caregivers are more likely than non-caregivers to push off seeing their own doctor for checkups and other needed appointments. They might also experience difficulty sleeping, have poor diet, lack exercise, and isolate themselves from family and friends. Now, according to the National Alliance for Caregivers, 44 million Americans serve as caregivers to people with disabilities or illnesses, and about 10% of these family caregivers are thought to be substance abusers. I was really surprised by that statistic. Another statistic shows that almost half of family caregivers take more medication than they did prior to assuming a caregiver role. So the question is, what might lead a caregiver towards substance abuse or addiction? Firstly, stress is a major risk factor for developing addiction problems, as well for relapsing if a person has been sober. In general, 60% of Americans increased their alcohol consumption during the pandemic, and almost half of these individuals noted the increase was due to stress related to the circumstances. So now that I've shown you and given you a lot of information and some of the latest statistics, I would like to turn it over to Dr. Jenna Labell, who will tell us more about addiction and ways to seek support. Hi, Jenna. Welcome.
Thank you, Lucy, for providing some information on how caregivers are potentially at a greater risk of suffering with substance abuse, dependence, or addiction. And maybe now we can move to the next slide where I'll actually define what addiction is, so we're all working with the same definition. So this is from the American Society of Addiction Medicine. I'll read it to you, and then I want to break it down a tiny bit before we move forward. So addiction is a treatable chronic medical disease involving complex interactions among brain circuits, genetics, the environment, and an individual's life experiences. People with addiction use substances or engage in behaviors that become compulsive and often continue despite harmful consequences. So this is my personal favorite definition of addiction to date. There are a few different ones, but I would just like to note the first piece of this definition. Addiction is treatable. So firstly, that should give hope that there is support, there is pathways to help for this disease of addiction. And that piece that I've just mentioned, the disease of addiction is a newer model of how we look at addiction today. In the past, and even still today, there's a lot of stigma associated with addiction or just substance abuse even, that people are weak, that there's a lack of willpower or strength. And the truth is, based on a lot of biopsychosocial research, it is evident that this is a chronic and progressive disease. So now we see addiction as an illness that is treatable, and that sometimes is very hard for people to adapt to or take in, but also it can be something that dispels a lot of shame because nobody as a young child says, I want to grow up and struggle with an alcohol addiction. Nobody chooses to suffer with this disease, but there is a piece of responsibility and accountability in you can choose to seek treatment for the illness that you did not choose to suffer with. So let's move forward to the next slide. And as we keep going through what I have to say, just keep in mind if you can recognize yourself as a caregiver in any of the signs or symptoms that I'm speaking about, or maybe things that you're worrying about for the person you're caring for. And then we'll target the topic specifically to caregiving as we go. So just in general, what substance or behaviors can be abused? Can you become addicted to? So alcohol, firstly, any drug, including illegal drugs, as well as legal drugs, meaning drugs that might be, or medications that might be prescribed to you. These can be used not as prescribed or abused as well. Cigarettes, vaping is much more popular in recent years, caffeine. And then when we talk about these compulsive behaviors, we're looking at things like shopping, whether that be online, in-person shopping, gambling, that could be also online, that could be sports betting, that could be in a casino. Cyber addiction. So this kind of encompasses anything to do with technology. So that might mean social media abuse, meaning excessive use of social media, video games, games on your phone, to the point where you lose track of time. It ends up having negative impacts on your on other areas of your life. We see this much more often with youth, but not only. And sex addiction, which also can include pornography addiction. So in general, as I move through these slides, when we speak about substances, these are the major ones I'm talking about on the left-hand side here. And when we speak about compulsive behaviors, keep in mind that those can equally have a negative effect on your life, just as substances could. So just keep those in the back of your mind as we continue to go through some of this information. So we can go to the next slide now. Okay, so we spoke about addiction as a progressive and chronic illness. So that means that it doesn't just start out of thin air. You may have predisposing factors, meaning aspects in your life or even hereditary components that put you at risk, but it doesn't just develop in a day. So I want to talk about the continuum of use and how a person actually moves into that definition of addiction that we spoke about. And think about where you feel like you might be at on this continuum of use, or where the person you're caring for may be at with their use of a substance or a behavior. So the first place that we start off at is experimental use. So experimental use is really a person experimenting with a substance or behavior out of curiosity 1 to 2 times max and does not go back to it. So this is very short-term use that doesn't typically have major consequences on a person's life. There are exceptions, but it's incredibly rare. And the person never really comes back to that. From there, when you increase in frequency of use, we get to more recreational use. So recreational is when you are using a substance or engaging in a compulsive behavior, often more for a purpose, more in a social setting, it's still not part of your regular routine, maybe to enhance a given moment, perhaps. For example, saying you're going to your cousin's wedding in 2 months and you're planning on having a few drinks there. That would be recreational use. Or going to a concert and planning to engage in substance use or other behaviors at that event, right? But it's not something that usually goes beyond that certain recreational moment. And again, it could have negative impacts on your life. It's subjective, but it isn't a part of your regular routine. And again, it can be done alone, but typically it's more social at this point. Then we get to regular use, which means that it's becoming part of your regular routine. Now, at this point, people still may not have a problem with a substance or behavior, even if something is regular, they also might. So I'll give you a few examples. Let's say we take alcohol. Someone might use alcohol. Someone might drink 1 glass of wine every Friday night with dinner, and it has no negative impacts in their life. It's not interacting negatively with any medication they're taking, or it has no repercussions necessarily, but it's considered regular use because it's happening once a week, every week, right? That person might not have any issue with that substance. Whereas someone might also use alcohol once a week, every week, but drinks every Friday to the point of blackout, or has sometimes had a DUI associated with it, or feels that they're recovering all weekend from the hangover or from the negative effects of whatever social interactions they engaged in that night. So again, regular use, there's no hard and fast rules about how often it has to be per week for it to be regular, or how much you're consuming, but a lot more about what are the consequences it's having in your life in a real way. And from there, we get, as you progress with regular use and it does become more frequent or increase in quantity and or increase in severity of negative consequences, we get to addiction, which we had defined previously. And so if we move to the next slide, we'll talk a bit more about what are the actual signs and symptoms that someone might be struggling with an addiction. So the first is wanting to stop but not being able to. For examples for each of these, I'm just going to use alcohol because I'll just keep the same substance as an example for all of them, but you can replace this with gambling, you can replace it with shopping, with substance use, prescription medication, whatever you might be coming into this presentation concerned about, or for yourself or for the person you're caring for. So let's say someone tells themselves, I really want to stop drinking, but they continuously find themselves in situations where they are drinking. And so it's very difficult for them, for some reason or another, to meet their goals of wanting to stop. That might be a sign that someone really is struggling above and beyond experimental use or recreational use, etc. Feeling a loss of control over your use. So an example of this is someone might say, okay, tonight I'm only going to have 2 beers when I go out with my friends. And yet after 2 beers, it becomes 3 beers, 4 beers, a case of beer. And there's something that kind of slips away from you, where you set a goal for yourself again of moderating, and you seem to almost never meet that goal for yourself. Changes in mood. So over time, the longer a person stays in the cycle of addiction, you might notice that it's affecting a person's mood, maybe lower mood, maybe increased anxiety, maybe irritability, difficulties even concentrating, so more cognitive effects, and physical changes as well. So without intentionally wanting to, a person may gain weight, lose weight, have other physical changes to their appearance, depending on the substance they're using or the behavior they're engaging in. Loss of interest in things that used to give a person pleasure. So whereas someone may have enjoyed recreational activities like hobbies, sports, socializing, going to social clubs, or whatever you may have been interested in, that seems to fall to the wayside and is oftentimes now replaced with substance use in those times instead. So people really feeling like they're only getting release, joy, from now substance use or compulsive behaviors as opposed to other things that used to bring them joy. Feeling unable to complete daily tasks without using substances or engaging in compulsive behaviors. So feeling that you're not able to get through a day of work without using a substance, or you're not able to get through a day of caregiving without using a substance. Feeling like you need it to function. Trouble in relationships. So oftentimes people might notice that loved ones or those around them are mentioning, I'm really worried about your behavior, or I'm worried about that one night that I saw you in that state. And it may take even larger tolls on relationships that you had not anticipated. Spending a lot of time, money, and effort either obtaining a substance, so thinking about planning, okay, I'm going to go get this then, and then I'm going to come back home and I'm going to use this at this time. Spending a lot of time or money using the substance and then recovering from the effects of the substance. So if you feel like it's starting to really take up a lot more time than it had initially, or back when you started using, or many years ago, perhaps, that might be a sign that it's starting to get out of hand in a way that you hadn't planned. Using substances to regulate emotions or as an escape from your reality. So feeling that especially difficult emotions like rejection, hopelessness, fear, anger, sadness, worry, feeling that you're using substances or compulsive behaviors to regulate those emotions, to dull them, to tolerate them, to escape your reality. That's what we refer to as self-medicating. So really using a substance or a behavior to calm down difficult emotions that you're having difficulty processing without the substance. And then cravings are both physical and psychological, and they differ depending on the substance. But in general, it's really this overwhelming physical and mental desire to use. So if you catch yourself noticing in the day, like you're really often thinking about substances, looking forward to coming home and using it, even feeling physically off if you don't use the substance, so that would be a more of a physical craving, that would be a sign and symptom that maybe there's a dependence here. Tolerance and withdrawal are both much more physical. They have psychological components to them as well. But tolerance just means when you need more and more of a substance to feel the effects that you did when you started using originally. So for example, whereas at a point in your life, you might have felt a certain high, euphoria, buzz, whatever that might be, from let's say 2 glasses of wine, with time now you need half a bottle to feel the same way. So that would be gaining a tolerance to a substance. And withdrawal is when you stop using a substance and you have a negative effect physically and mentally. So when you stop, let's say, drinking, you might notice that your hands are shaking. For some people that drink heavily, even just a night of sleeping without drinking anything, you can wake up with shaky hands, feeling nauseous, sick, difficulty concentrating. If you don't use a substance, you feel irritable, you have low mood. Those are all symptoms of withdrawal. So it's when when the substance or behavior is taken away or you stop using it, something negative is experienced in its place. And those subside over time. But for some people, you might also need some other medications and supervision of a medical professional to help you get through some of the withdrawal, depending on your level of severity. So let's move to the next slide now, please. Okay, so bringing this story of addiction back, zoning in more to caregiving, what if you've been listening to this presentation so far and you feel like you're worried about a loved one that you're caring for, either abusing a substance or engaging in compulsive behaviors that feels like it's getting out of hand, what to do, how to broach the topic. So it's obviously going to look different for everyone, but the first thing that you might consider doing is just gently approaching the person about your concerns. Now, you have to reflect on, is this safe for me to do? Is this safe for this person? You really have to think about your unique situation. And if you feel like, yes, I could potentially speak with this person and that doesn't put either of us at risk, or maybe even writing a letter, this is a way where you could just sort of ask the person, how are you feeling about, your drinking lately? I've noticed it's increased, or I've been worried about your mood. You seem lower lately, and just have a conversation about that. Maybe do you think it's related to this behavior you're engaging in more, or just gently kind of approaching with curiosity and care, and informing the person that you're perhaps concerned and also there to help. So in a non-judgmental manner. You may also feel though that it could be helpful to speak with their family doctor. So you might have a conversation with their family doctor and explain some of the concerns you're having about their substance use, about other behaviors they're engaging in that maybe are having negative consequences on their health, their finances, your relationship, and then you can maybe create a treatment plan together of how to support the person you're caring for. I just want to note that sometimes people feel like, okay, well, I'll just take the substance away and that'll be that. And I just want to note that that can be a bit dangerous, even physically, which is why it can be very helpful to involve a family doctor. So, for example, I'm thinking of alcohol specifically. If someone is drinking heavily, which again is subjective for everyone, but if the severity of the alcohol or the alcohol use disorder is high, you cannot just simply cut someone off from that. I mean, it can be very dangerous and potentially even deadly in certain instances. So you may want to have a doctor supervise the reduction of the alcohol, maybe even prescribe other medication to help. So don't feel like you need to take all that responsibility on yourself. It is important to involve a medical professional, especially with substances like alcohol. You might also just want to educate yourself more about the disease of addiction. It can be very confusing as a loved one or family member or partner of a person struggling with addiction to understand, well, why can't they just stop? What is happening here? Where is the person that I once knew, and how did this get here? And so to just educate yourself, whether that be through support groups, through reading material, through speaking with a healthcare professional, just to better understand the process of addiction, how you got to this place, and to dispel some of the shame and perhaps blame also that we easily might feel we can put on those struggling with this disease. Focusing on your own self-care is incredibly important. So as caregivers already, you are putting a lot of time, effort, care, love into the well-being of the person you're caring for. And then to add another level of the disease of addiction, or even just substance abuse itself, or behavioral, compulsive behaviors there as well, you can really get lost in zoning in entirely on this person and losing yourself in the process. And focusing on your own self-care is incredibly helpful for you to then be able to be there for the person you're caring for and supporting through perhaps substance treatment or reduction. So seeking out your own support can look like going to support groups like Al-Anon. Al-Anon is a 12-step based program all across North America and pretty much most places in the world, that is free, that is open and welcome to any family member or loved one who has family members or loved one of someone struggling with an addiction, to get support from their community. You might also contact some counseling or clinical programs have a separate stream where they offer support for family members or loved ones. So that might be something you look into in your area. You may seek out individual therapy with someone who's specialized in the topic of addiction. That would just be a small caveat. I think it's important that someone be a little bit at least well educated on that topic, and keeping connected to friends and family. So not staying in isolation when we know that isolation is already something caregivers face, even when the person they're caring for doesn't have a substance use disorder in the picture. And lastly, self-compassion. So it's very difficult to watch a loved one struggle and to remember to be gentle on yourself in that time, and that it's not just them going through a hard time, but you as well with them. So now we'll move to the next slide where I'll speak a bit more about what to do if you are concerned about your own substance use and or compulsive behaviors while you're caring for a loved one. The first is really just acknowledging, do I have an issue? Right before we jump to what to do, how to change, how to help myself, which is great. It's really just coming to terms with, okay, maybe I am a bit concerned about my substance use or my social media use or my whatever the case might be. Just to have that conversation with yourself first of maybe I do want to look into this without judging yourself. And so some questions you might ask are, do I self-medicate with alcohol, substances, or other behaviors when I'm stressed, angry, sad, overwhelmed? Do I use substances or compulsive behaviors to cope with caregiving? So when I feel hopeless or worried about my loved one's state of being, is that what I'm using to help myself get through? Is that what I'm using to help with the worries and the stress? Asking yourself, how often do I use these substances or these compulsive behaviors? And has it increased over time in how much I'm using or in how frequently I'm engaging in it? And do I find that problematic? The answer may be yes or no. It's very subjective and personal to you. Am I taking my prescription medication, if you are prescribed medications, as prescribed by my doctor? Or am I misusing them, either using more or using it more frequently to help me cope, to help me sleep? And is my substance use or compulsive behaviors affecting other areas of my life? So to have an honest look at yourself of, is this something that's become an issue in my relationships? Is it affecting my ability to fulfill responsibilities? Is it affecting my ability to be a caregiver and care for my loved one? And if the answer is yes, again, it's not a judgment. It's really, okay, let me come to terms with what I may be facing in reality and the difficult situation I'm living through. And now how can I help myself? So at the end, I just wrote, you're not alone. There are a lot of people who are in the position of caregiver. There are a lot of people who are in the position of being a loved one for someone suffering with an addiction, for being someone suffering with an addiction yourself. And there are a lot of different spaces where you can connect with others to not be alone through this. So that's what I want to talk about in the next slide, is then how to seek help. And this could be for yourself and or for a loved one you might be caring for. So if you feel like you're struggling, perhaps confiding in a loved one, taking a friend aside, a family member aside, and saying, I've been a bit concerned about my own behaviors, my own substance use. It's uncomfortable for me to talk about it. But, just broaching the topic may feel like you're not so alone with it anymore. Also support groups, so things like Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, for behaviors, there's like Gamblers Anonymous, all kinds of different free, long-term, open groups that are very welcoming and actually do have a lot of scientific evidence behind them as being effective for long-term sobriety. If sobriety is what you're looking for, you may look for clinical programs targeted towards abstinence. You might also be looking for programs to help with reduction. So maybe you're looking more for healthy moderation, if that's possible for you. So finding the proper support, clinicians, treatment centers that may be best suited for your personal objectives. Speaking with your own family doctor can also be a first step, and that person likely also has places to refer you and may know you best and how to meet your needs. Seeking out counseling or personal therapy, again, with someone who has a bit more specialty in addiction is ideal. And lastly, identifying your healthy coping mechanisms. So what are those things that before substance use used to help you relax, used to bring you joy? What are things that have fallen to the wayside, like going for a walk, exercising, socializing, picking up an old hobby? What are those things that you can start doing more instead of substance use in a given day? And that's a really conscious effort that it takes to start rethinking of, okay, instead of going for a drink, maybe I'll try taking a bath tonight. And that really does take a lot of practice in using other coping mechanisms. But if you find that you're unable to engage in that, that it's too difficult, you may need more intensive assistance with your substance use and reduction as well. So in the last slide, there's resources specific to the US where you can call or text or look up online sort of helplines and where to go for services. These are resources I was given a while back. I also just added at the bottom that you can always do a quick Google search of AA meetings in your local area. And typically there is a number or an email address of someone you can contact there who can guide you to a meeting that might be best suited for you, or who may also have other suggestions for you for resources. So I will pause here for now, and I would love to open it up to questions, comments, personal experiences, feedback. And I really appreciate you listening to this topic today. I hope it was helpful.
Thank you.
Well, it was great. You did such a nice job. Sorry, Lucy.
No, thank you so much. It's been extremely interesting for me to also, um, explore this topic. And I think what you said that was so important is not to judge yourself. You know, we all go through difficult times in our lives, especially if you're a caregiver. And and what you said also is that you're not alone. And I think that's the key factor is not to feel isolated and alone and be able to reach out. So here we are. We have a nice, a little bit of time to ask questions. Dr. Jenna Labell is here. So if you have any, and I'll leave it up to you, Evelyn, if you can sort of chair it from now.
Thank you, folks. We have an expert. We'd love to hear from you, both your experiences or your questions, or maybe how you handle situations with friends or family, if any of these things have happened to you. And if you are on the telephone, you can press *6, and I have a lovely little website where I can see if someone has opened up their phone. So please feel free. Let me ask you a question, Dr. Labell. I've been reading a lot recently on brain plasticity and all the research they're doing with the brain. And it's about what they talk about is that it's, all of these things are just habits, and they're habits that we get into over time. And you can learn to break a habit, and then it rewires your brain. What can you talk about that at all?
Sure. What's happening basically in addiction treatment is a lot of neuroplasticity. You're creating new pathways and trying not to feed old pathways. So you can think a little bit about it like when you're going cross-country skiing. There's like these paths that are very well carved. And so it does take some effort to get off that path that is well carved and create a new one. And so when we talk about like coping mechanisms, breaking habits, it's your brain will easily go to, okay, well, if I'm angry or I'm sad, like this substance always helps me. This external behavior has always, quelled my symptoms in the given moment, even though it has many negative consequences long term. So it's how to kind of start connecting and making new neural pathways of, okay, now I don't go to that, I go to this instead, or I call a friend, or I engage in another behavior. I'm obviously reducing it to something very simplistic right now, but we know that there are one of the reasons why there's a lot of research behind it being a brain disease, why we call it a chronic illness, is also because of the body of research related to the changes that happen in the brain with chronic use of substances. I don't want to get too bogged down in all the details, but basically there's a lot of story around dopamine, so the pleasure chemical in your brain that, it fires off when you engage in substance use or compulsive behavior at a much, much higher rate than it would for adaptive behaviors like exercise or socializing, especially with chronic use over time. And so it's learning how to experience joy and pleasure in things that are not substance related or compulsive behavior related over time. And this takes practice, a lot of support, a lot of connection with others. But brain plasticity is a big piece of people's recovery. And that's what happens in a therapeutic setting for sure.
Great explanation. And it's just, I guess what I'm thinking is that we need substitutes. We need to find, things that will make us happy or at least take our mind to be distracted, from what we've gotten into the habit of doing. So I really appreciate that. Thank you. Come on, folks, let's see. Oh, Minerva, would you like to talk to us?
No.
Okay.
Did I unmute myself by accident?
No, Minerva put some stuff in the chat box. I don't know if everyone saw it, but we have some additional recordings, and she looked them up to see what might be supportive of this presentation. And we really, we would love to have you look at that and think about those because it goes right along with what Dr. Labell has been telling us, about how to take better care of yourself. Um, it's both, and there's pharmacy here as well as, that's the other thing, medications, the risks, there's a lot of good stuff here. So check out that chat. And are you going to send those out afterwards, Minerva?
Yes, there will be an email afterwards that'll have these links plus the PDF of the presentation that Dr. Labell's going to be sharing with the participants.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Minerva is the heart and soul of this program, folks. Just want you to know that. Besides our many wonderful presenters, our expert presenters. So anybody, come on, let's ask some questions. Tell us your experiences. Maybe you're worried about talking to somebody and she can help you figure out how to do it.
You could be anonymous. Go ahead. I was going to ask a question. Go ahead.
I was just going to say that I know that this topic can be difficult to speak about. There's a lot of perhaps stigma associated with it or fear. So just the fact that you're here listening, maybe taking something away. Maybe you didn't see yourself in this presentation, but you learned something. Maybe you did see yourself or the person you're caring for, and it doesn't sit quite right with you, and that's okay. But at least you're here and you showed up to listen to a topic that often is not spoken about so much.
Thank you so much. Yes. All right, folks. Let's see, another chat here. Let me see.
It says that Andrea shared some sort of a file. I just want to kind of oh, there you are, Andrea. Would you like to speak?
Hello, hi, good morning. I'm Andrea Salinas with the Healthy Brain and Aging Program with Cameron County Public Health Department. And we also do dementia and Alzheimer's simulations. If any of y'all are interested, I see Area Agency on Aging is here. I know we've been trying to contact them with any other resources for some of our elderly population because I currently have up to 30 clients right now that I'm assisting here in Cameron County in San Benito, Brownsville, we have La Feria, Santa Rosa. I have them all on my board right now, Santa Maria. And I'm trying to actually build a ramp right now and a prosthetic leg through the engineering department at UTRGV. So that was another webinar we did yesterday with one of the doctors there, occupational therapy. So if anybody's interested, we also have dementia resource specialist, and we do have contacts with WellMed. We collaborate with WellMed and New Horizon, and we do dementia series where we talk about different ways of keeping healthy and eating healthy in our brains. And there's just a lot of information, a lot of good information. So if you guys are interested, our director, Ms. Cheyenne Moraida, can also do a webinar live series as well on dementia.
Wait, great, great.
Yeah.
Maybe you could give me your contact information so we could see if your director
I
would.
went ahead and added it right there.
Oh,
our,
great. So I see
email
it.
and
Thank you
everything.
so much.
Yes,
And
definitely, definitely.
so Cameron County, Texas.
Cameron County Public Health Department. We're located here in San Benito, Texas.
Okay, San Benito. Okay.
My work county cell, let me give it to you because we just got it the week after the flood. It is 956-338-6759.
956-338-5769.
6759.
Backwards. A little
I know, I can't get used to this number. It's my, yeah. I know my personal cell by heart, but not this one yet.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you. so
Everybody-
much.
I just wanted to say, to ask a question, the stigma of addiction, and I love the way you there was a substance and there's behaviors, and which can be just as difficult as alcohol or any substance, as could be shopping or sex addiction, whatever it is. But the stigma has always been there. Do you think that it's getting a little bit better? I mean, do you think people are, or is it still the same, like that whole idea behind people having difficulty or being ashamed to get help?
I mean, I think that there is some movement towards more discussions about it with less shame. Even here in Quebec, although it hasn't passed yet, they're trying to ban cell phone use in high schools. And so there's some understanding about, excessive screen time and how that affects the brain and learning. And so, yeah, I think that there are shifts for sure. Someone wrote in the chat, food addiction can be added to the list 100%. And there are also support groups related to overeating. Yeah, I think that it's shifting, but very slowly. And even working with people that suffer with it or that have family members that suffer with addiction or dependence of substance or behavior, there is still a lot of shame to be worked through. And that's why there's a lot of isolation and disconnection with addiction because people live in shame, they stay with it alone, and that really feeds the addiction over time. So the opposite of that is connection, which is why it's such an important piece of treatment to be with others, to connect with others who are working towards the same goals as you, who understand the disease well. So the answer is yes and no. I think with things like sex addiction and pornography addiction, there is still a lot of taboo, unfortunately, there. But it can have huge ramifications negatively on a person's life, and they stay sick for quite some time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for that. Anybody else? We've got just a few minutes of time for a question or two. Okay, well, while you're thinking, I'm going to tell you about some sessions that we have coming up, some very interesting sessions. Next Monday, we have Planning Ahead with Legal Documents. What do I need and when? And this is something we hear almost all the time, that people are waiting to the very end to do planning, and it's too late. That they get into a place where they have to make an emergency decision because they haven't thought about, what would we do if the caregiver went into the hospital? Who's going to take care of dad? I mean, things like that. So it's really important to plan ahead and include your legal documents. On Tuesday of next week, we have one in Spanish, and it is frontline interventions for treating dementia, and that's with Dr. Pradario, who's a geriatric psychiatrist, one of our few in the United States. For 30 million older Americans, we have 4,000 geriatric psychiatrists. So we always love it when he presents for us. And then on May 21st, we have the basics of hospice care. And it's interesting because there's a lot of confusion between hospice care and palliative care, and so it's really important that we know the differences. And it's important that we understand that hospice care doesn't mean you have to be dying or dead, to be able to qualify for it. Because some people feel like, well, that 6 month is, it's like a terminal end to it. So, but it is for people who are gravely ill and who need some help in dying comfortably. That's what hospice is about. So I want to thank all of our participants today. I particularly want to thank Jenna for her wonderful preparation and presentation. And also, Lucy, you weren't just a facilitator, of course, you're always a teacher too, our professor, dear Lucy. And I thank you so much for kind of giving the introduction to the topic, because it really meant a lot, kind of set the pace, set the frame for us. And with that, unless anybody has anything else, I don't see anybody opening their unmuting or opening their phone. So I am going to stop the recording and hope to see you all again with our next session. And that hope you enjoyed this, and thank you so much for participating. All right, I got people clapping here.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
And hearts too. Yes. All right.
Yourselves, caregivers.
Yes, thank you so much for what you do every day, our caregivers. All right, I'm going to stop the recording now, and thank you again. Hope you have a great day. Be safe.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.